again. We're always so glad to see you and your fine heart. Your seat is ready for you as soon as you put your burdens down. You don't need them for a while. Just leave them outside the door. Take a seat. Just rest for a while. You can pick them up if you need them later. I'm going to read chapter 14 of The Flower of Freedom. As always, all rights are reserved to both the book and the presentation. Just a reminder before I begin, this chapter is about war. War is hell. No matter who thinks they won, the price is always far too high. The topic of this chapter is a fight to liberate the chateau from the Nazis. Okay, with that warning, I'll begin. Remember, war is no video game. People die. Chapter 14, Escape. The first three girls told them about the back staircase, and they were rushed down and out into the side yard not long before the explosives detonated. They were dressed only in their slippers and thin nightgowns. Their pregnant bodies were a stark testimony to the events of the chateau. Two girls were loaded onto a cart the moment they broke out of the woods. The third girl was from town, and she was rushed away to her waiting elderly parents. Thomas tore through the dormitory looking for his daughter. Each girl that he sent ahead shook her head and said that they had not seen her for months. Thomas climbed to the third floor and he found a makeshift delivery suite. And as he explored, he discovered a discarded baby with brown hair in a wastepaper bin. There was no time to weep. He had to find his daughter. Where was his daughter? He could hear the battle now raging at the front of the chateau. German precision, however, ensured that the girls would not be left unattended. A soldier bolted up to the second floor from the kitchen, and he locked each door as he ran down the corridor. One time he ducked into a closet to avoid the invaders, and then he ran along up to the third floor. He discovered an invader in the delivery suite, where perfect German babies were brought into the world for the future of the Reich. Their fathers were good German SS men. They belonged to Germany. Just as Thomas turned from the horror he found in the bin, a young man in Nazi uniform, with keys dangling from his hand, entered the room with his knife drawn. Thomas looked into the young man's eyes, and in confusion that consumed his brain, he said, "Michael, we have to get out of here." "Papa?" the young man said, and then he turned and suppressed all emotion. His training snapped to attention. "Halt, in the name of the Fuhrer." "Stop it, Michael! Turn, we must get out of here right now. Where's your sister?" "I do not care who you are. You will bend your knee to the Fuhrer. I will do my duty," said the brainwashed young man, jutting out his chin, just as his father had seen him do as a tiny boy. Just then, a resistance fighter, who thought he had seen a Nazi climb the stairs to the third floor, spun in through the doorway. Instantly, he evaluated the uniform and the look on Thomas's face, and he plunged his knife into the soldier's kidney, and then withdrawing it, he drew it across the young man's throat. Thomas dove towards his son and moaned a soul-sick cry of devastation. There was no time. Unable to fathom what had happened to Thomas, the confused resistance fighter ran back downstairs to help others, leaving Thomas in a puddle of blood and remorse. At the front of the chateau, the battle between Nazi fighters, some on vacation and some stationed there, and farm hands and trained resistance fighters raged. The poacher team conducted 17 girls out into the forest and beyond, 2 others who were stationed on the roadsides with wagons awaiting to transport the girls. They had to batter down some of the locked doors to get the girls out. By then, some of the girls were dressed. They wanted to be quit of that house of horrors. Thomas's daughter was not among them. At the front of the chateau, the Nazis were winning. The call to action had come just a bit too soon. The Nazis were trained and organized, but the townsfolk, both local men and women, and volunteer resistance fighters from across France, from across the world, fought with greater purpose. They were prepared to die, and the Nazis were happy to oblige them. The death toll that night was beyond horrific, and it did not stop at the chateau. One of the poachers had gone back into the building, and he had found Thomas on the 3rd floor after he had pointed the way to several more pregnant girls. The poacher dragged Thomas, who was weeping over the body of a Nazi guard, out of the forest. He assumed that the gentleman was suffering a nervous breakdown because he could not find his daughter. He was so glad that the lady photographer was there to help him, because Thomas was putting up a mighty fight to return to that place of death. That was just before Desmond was captured at the front doors of the chateau. By then, so many of their friends and neighbors were dead. The poachers could do nothing as the Nazis loaded Odette onto a car. The poachers ran for their lives. It was all they could do to get the foreign photographer to safety. Desmond was arrested and loaded onto a boxcar destined for Paris. He had been scheduled to leave to travel back to England that night and on to Canada the next night. So the waiting plane had an empty seat. When reports of the rescue of the girls at the chateau reached the pilot's ears, he took the first 2 girls, who arrived on a wagon that was supposed to be carrying Desmond. He took them in Desmond's place, once he learned that their parents were dead and they had no home to go to. Together they appeared to total about Desmond's weight, so he calculated that he would have enough fuel to make it. The pilot was a drinking buddy of Desmond's, and he knew that he would want it that way. The girls would have melted the hardest of hearts. The pilot threw a rough old blanket over their shoulders, and he watched them quake as they looked up through as though they were surprised by human kindness. They looked barely 16, and they were very pregnant. The pilot was sure that he would transport his old paisan on one of the following nights. He would volunteer for another tour to retrieve Desmond. That guy had a knack of turning up like a bad penny. As they lifted up off the air and into the air, the pilot asked the girls their names in an attempt to distract them from the terror of flying for the first time. He did not hear the muted response of the first girl, but the second girl's name was Anne-Marie Pomade. That's the end of this chapter. I look so forward to reading the next one to you. It's chapter 15. France wants Marie back.